The lights above Port Hercule were a soft grid reflected on the black water. And the rooftop of the Oceanographic Museum held a patient kind of chill, the kind that climbs your sleeves and takes its time. Crystal glasses clicked like a metronome set to slow. The band was tuning a saxophone behind gauzy drapes, and I could see the bride's party move as a practiced cluster white, gold, and the tan confidence of people who believe they own the view. The planner, in a headset and a fixed smile, paced the line of waiters with a tablet. A senior concierge from the Hotel de Paris scanned name tags. The groom's uncle laughed a little too loud near the edge, where the sea turned into a matte postcard. I stood at a high table, one hand resting on a thick ivory envelope that smelled faintly of glue and bergamot, and watched my cousin Layla pretend not to see me. The saxophone slid into a steady warm-up trill, and the wind pushed a thin strand of Leela's hair across her cheek as if it was whispering something she didn't want to hear. They say family events in Monaco are choreographed like regatta snow sudden turns. It's just a series of practiced angles and a finish line visible from every balcony. My seat card had been missing from the rehearsal dinner last night, which might have been an error if not for the way Leela's mother folded her hands and said, "It's complicated," as though the seating algorithm had developed moral convictions. This afternoon, an embossed envelope did arrive at my apartment on Avenue Princess Grace. It contained a program, a map, and a line in elegant script advising intimate circle only in a tone that patted my cheek without touching it. I slid the envelope into my bag next to a black moleskin where I'd neatly listed clause numbers, wire IDs, and a short column titled "If Then," each option circled in pencil. I wasn't here to be dramatic. I was here to watch a set of choices finish what they had already started. A waiter working the terrace flicked a lighter twice, resting a candle into a ribbed glass. The flame hesitated and then committed a tiny treaty signed with oxygen. I could smell rosemary from the garnish station and faint machine oil from a service door that wouldn't quite close. Lila's fiancé Etienne did a small tour of the outer tables, hand on shoulder, hand on elbow, his cufflinks engraved with the family crest his grandfather claimed to have designed. I lifted my glass, took a measured sip, and, through the clink and the beaded chill, felt the outline of the envelope, square and patient under my palm. Simple stakes, I told myself. Reputation for them, autonomy for me, the truth for anyone who cared to look. In the next minutes, you'll see how a canceled contract can speak more clearly than a speech. Two things had been off from the first moment: the missing place card at the rehearsal dinner, and the way the planner's assistant kept glancing at her phone as if watching a countdown. Those details had the gravity of small planets. By the time the welcome toast began, I'd already filed and served notices in ways that would look like coincidence until they didn't. The first was a rescission letter on the museum venue contract, properly executed, notarized at a marble desk that morning by a notary with an ink pad and the steady hands of a violinist. The second was a freeze instruction on a specific operations account that the planner used for vendor advances, authorized under a clause they should have read twice and never did. You learn a lot when you work as a contract manager for luxury events, where the money breathes, where compliance sleeps, and how the mildest tone can be a pry bar if you use the right words at the right time. Layla turned toward the band as if directing sound with her profile. Her father, my uncle, gray at the temples in the charming way that promises competence without ever having to deliver it, took the mic and thanked friends who had flown in, friends who had flown out, and friends here in spirit, a phrase designed to flatten the specific into decor. 2 tables over, I saw the museum's event manager, a woman named Sabine, with a neat bun and a wrist tattoo of a line of waves, take a call and step back into the shadow of a column. The wind smelled now of citrus peel and salt, and a faint metallic temps, like the inside of a key. The planner touched her headset and tried for a smile that stalled halfway. "Seems I'm not family." I murmured it to the rim of my glass, not expecting it to feel like anything other than what it was, an observation assembled from well-lit facts. When the toast ended, slid the envelope from the table to my bag and crossed to the far railing, where the light broke into slender pieces on the water. I could see the harbor cranes at idle and a yacht so large it required the precision of a small city. My phone buzzed a haptic pattern I'd assigned only to one person, Motor Durand, my lawyer and an old friend who prefers paper to headlines. I answered with a small yes, and he responded, acknowledged, and recorded. The rescission is logged, receipt timestamped at 1904. The museum has countersigned the acceptance. We're within the cancellation window you cited from addendum. See, it's enforceable. Are you well? Well enough, I said. And the fund transfer? Frozen, he replied. The bank manager confirmed compliance. With the freeze instruction at 1853, on the operational account ending 1492, the back office reconciler redacted. The line items per your citing of the audit clause. Vendor wires queued at 1840 have been automatically reversed into escrow. Your affidavit about the fraudulent use of your digital credentials has been witnessed and attached. You do not need to shout, Maya. Procedure is louder. Thank you, I said, and watched a gull draw a white seam across the dark. The air had that late summer cool that asks you if you've brought a scarf and then makes you prove it. I didn't cancel the venue to ruin Leela's wedding. I canceled it because the contract they were using bore my name, my signature, and my liability on a rider I never approved. It wasn't a mystery how my signature got there. Not once you knew Leela's fiancé's brother, Luke, had admin access to the shared planning portal and a habit of logging into other people's profiles to help. A verb that could take on any shape he needed. The planner had let her assistant run the e-sign for the last wave of approvals. The assistant reused a template that pre-selected authorized parties. And when I cross-checked the audit trail last week, I saw my identity token attached to a session at 2:12 a.m. after two-factor code started failing. That's not a family oversight. That's theft of credential. I won't shout. I'll use process and receipts. The first loop I planted was communication. I sent the planner a polite question about a surcharge. She replied with a scripted phrase as discussed, as if that incantation could conjure a meeting that never existed. The second loop was a locked drawer in Leela's apartment. One I knew existed because she asked me to fix the sticking track weeks ago. The drawer had a thin envelope of printed documents, including a partnership deed for a charitable foundation she and Etienne were starting as the wedding's positive impact piece. The deed named me as a trustee, which was a surprise to the trustee. The third loop was a contact in my phone, saved as a single letter, V, who has a way of making concierge desks tell the truth. The fourth was a missing item, the hard copy of my late mother's will that once lived in my safe and had been replaced with a photocopy that smelled of toner and irony. The fifth was a little script that Leela's mother used whenever she was cornered. Let's not make this about paperwork, which is exactly what people say when everything is paperwork. By midweek, I'd collected copies. The amended venue contract, the rider, the planner's operating account statements, the foundation's deed, and 2 wire confirmations to a consultancy in Berlin that did not appear on any public vendor list. I built a timeline. Stack of actions with dates neat as ledger lines. 8:12 logged incident with bank fraud desk. 8:40 filed preliminary complaint. 9:03 requested notarized confirmation of signature specimen. 10:15 spoke to museum manager about Clause C7 force majeure and fraud exception. 11:22 emailed planner requesting redacted invoice details. 13:05 phoned notary to reserve a slot. 16:47 met with Mater Durand. 18:02 secured affidavit from my concierge, who watched Luke help at the planning portal on a shared lobby terminal, something he explained as completely normal. If you're not used to it, the hum of a building's AC at night on a marble staircase can sound like a calm, reasonable ghost. On Thursday, in the AC's hum, I scanned my signature under a magnifying loupe at Durand's office. It's the tiny angle on the K incon that I've made since I was 14, like a private shrug. On the rider attached to the contract, the K was too neat. The shrinking angle of someone imitating a flourish they didn't understand. Durand circled it with a soft pencil and said, "This will be persuasive." My allies were the kind of people who live between clean edges. Sabine, the museum manager, who doesn't bluff. V, whose real profession I don't ask about. The bank manager Rashid, who treats process like a liturgy. My neighbor Luis, a junior auditor whose favorite hobby is telling people where their numbers leak. And a quiet compliance officer at the planner's parent company who answered my call from a train and said, "If you file something formal, I can escalate it. I cannot act on a phone call. File, so I can pull the lever." This is what I mean when I say I prefer procedure to persuasion. With procedure, each verb earns interest. Tonight, at this rooftop, I was here to watch leverage do its gentle, precise work. When Sabine returned from her call, she lifted her chin toward the planner and made a small summoning gesture. They walked to the museum's side office just off the terrace, where a glass door displayed a discreet white sign, Administration. Through the glass, I could see a narrow desk, a stack of laminated floor plans, and a light that was too bright for the mood, honest in a way that most parties are not. I leaned again on the high table and let the rosemary scent drift across my wrist. The planner's smile was hostile composed when she emerged. She scanned the terrace for me and then carefully scanned past me, which is another way to look. I stayed where I was until my phone buzzed a second time with the bank's confirmatory SMS. The one that starts with a reference number and ends with action recorded. I tapped V's message, which said simply, "Heads up, Luke is on the move." Luke appeared at the bar in a collar that wanted attention. He ordered something brown and held his phone at a tilt that spoke of urgent favor trading. He has a tell when he lies. He taps the rim of his glass twice, as if stamping air. He tapped. He watched Sabine speak to security near the elevator. He tapped again. He pivoted toward the hallway that leads to the service lift. The wind moved through the terrace with a small draft that flicked the drapes like fishtails. I set my glass down and crossed to intercept. "Lovely night to stare at an elevator," I said lightly. "I'm just getting some air," he replied, already irritated, as if I'd interrogated the oxygen. "Air is free," I said, "but the operational account ending 1492 is not. Don't bother trying to flush it through the vendors. The bank manager has escalated the freeze, and reverse wires do not apologize when they come home." Lutz's mouth seemed to reconsider its shape. He flexed the phone, hunting for bravado. "You've made a mistake," he said. "You're confused." "It's a very clear kind of confusion," I said. "There's a mistake on a rider with my name. A login at 2:12 a.m. A recorded keystroke at the lobby terminal with your reflection on the glass frame 11 hours, 3 minutes, and 14 seconds. And a partnership deed that named me trustee of a foundation with no intention of compliance. You're calling Berlin in case they're already spinning up an invoice mill? But Berlin cannot salvage a countersigned rescission." He exhaled through his nose and tried a smile that aimed for Nephew Charming. "Your family," he said. "Family helps family. Family asks first," I said. "Family doesn't sign for you, spend you, or assume your decoration. Also, family doesn't edit a PDF of my mother's will and put the photocopy back like a schoolboy swapping exam pages." The hallway shrank by half an inch. He wasn't expecting that one yet. "You don't know what you're talking about," he said, but his eyes moved in the quick, guilty way of someone forced to count. "I know enough to file," I said. "And I have filed." He took a step in, just enough to make his cologne sharper, something musky with an afterthought of spice, and said, too quietly, "If you ruin this night, no one here will forgive you. If I let you keep my name on a liability, the bank won't forgive me," I said. "We all have gods." Lights upticked. The saxophone settled into a ready key, and the room tilted back toward party lit. Luke tucked his phone into his pocket and moved past me with the small shoulder that men believe does them favors. He turned toward the terrace, and I turned back to the high table where my lawyer's envelope waited for a neat exit. Behind me, Sabine spoke to the planner, who pressed 2 fingers against the spot between her eyebrows where a headache means. "You've been borrowing other people's time. 30 minutes earlier." I de-looped in the Discreet Public's administrative liaison. A notarized fraud complaint is filed. They don't rush the dance, but they do stand at the back of the room like an uninvited conscience. I spotted him now by the coat check, a modest mustache, and a notebook with a spine creased from the habit of folding. He nodded to me in the way of someone acknowledging a box ticked. At the same moment, my neighbor Luis texted an image, a screenshot of a line in the planner's system where a venue extension surcharge had been added 3 times in slightly different amounts, likely to mask a siphon. He wrote, "Found your leak." The amounts were rounded differently to dodge a simple delta check. That's a Luke trick. He once boasted he could make sense sing. I tucked the phone back into my bag, the envelope resting against it like a second heart. The smell of fresh brioche floated in from the service area, sweet and warm, followed by the cooler scent of dry stone as someone opened a stairwell door. The band started the first set formally, a standard with a slow heel-toe to it, and the older relatives relaxed into the part of the night that promised photographs that looked like magazine pages. Leela's dress was a classic cascade, understated at a glance, and then quietly extravagant when it caught light. There's an art to appearing effortless. She had learned it. She had also learned to outsource every hard conversation to timing, hoping the clock would apologize for her. My mother taught me different habits. She taught me to read the clause that people pretend is ornamental. She taught me to store my calm in the same drawer as my passport. She died 3 years ago in Nice under a sky so bright the clouds had sharp edges. And in the effort and grief that followed, I let her safe become a half-open habit. Last month, I opened it and found the will's original gone, replaced with a copy. The notary still had the recorded instrument, which is why we have registries, not shrines. But even a photocopy has a smell when it means someone made a decision about you when you weren't looking. I held that copy in the kitchen and felt like the light had blinked. Tonight, watching Leela glide between tables, I felt nothing violent. I felt the slow precision of a chess move that makes a grandfather sigh. I could hear silverware set down gently. I could feel the table's lacquer cool through my elbow. Sabine approached me with the pragmatic calm of someone who has had a good cry and then washed her face. "Mademoiselle Khan," she said, "I want to confirm that we have acknowledged your rescission. Per the countersigned acceptance, the museum is releasing the event from our obligations. We will escort guests to the alternate hospitality at the Hotel de Paris as a courtesy. Your letter mentioned that you had reason to believe the event contract was falsely authorized under your name. We will cooperate with any investigation and share the access logs." "Thank you," I said. "I appreciate your clarity." She glanced at the terrace. "There will be unhappiness. There is a difference between unhappiness and injustice," I said. I let the contract tell the truth. The planner was already moving through layers of damage control. Voice pitched to professional reassurance, eyes jittering toward the office like a singed moth. Leela's gaze found mine across the space. Her face did a series of micro-expressions: recognition, denial, anger, implementation. She crossed the roof like someone walking through opposing winds. "What did you do?" she asked, and her tone was flat, which was worse than loud. "I removed my name from your obligations," I said. "You put it there without asking. I rescinded a contract that exposed me to liability for your event. I froze an account that used my credentials to run vendor prepayments. I did all of this calmly, promptly, and with copies. We needed you," she said, as if that were the part that mattered. "You know how to do these things. You make the hard parts disappear." By reading them aloud, I said, "You misheard the method. You also misused it." "It's just a wedding," she said, tiny knives on the word just. "It's a web of signatures," I said, "and you hung me in it without consent." The music shifted to accommodate the mood, an instinctive pivot of professionals who can feel the temperature of a room through their shoes. The air was cooler now, the stone holding a day's warmth that it released reluctantly. A woman at a nearby table whispered into her hand. Someone else laughed, too bright, the way people do when they want to echo a better country. "You went to the safe," I said quietly, so the words would arrive alone. "You replaced the original with a copy. Why?" Her eyes were ready to feign ignorance. Then she realized she was trapped between pretense and math. "Etienne thought the foundation would be easier to set up if I were trustee," I said. "Because I have an unimpeachable record with the banks. Because I am boring in the most useful ways. It would just be for a year," she said. "A bridge. A bridge to what? To the life we deserve, she said. And there it was, the clean line that divides need and entitlement. You deserve what you signed for, I said. You signed my name. Leela did not cry. She never does when someone is watching. She looked past me to the horizon as if the sea could underwrite us. The saxophone made a sound like a breath held too long and then released. Somewhere behind the bar, a bottle bonked lightly against another. Glass on glass, like a polite alarm. We can move the dinner, she said suddenly, switching to logistics as if she could outrun cause with effect. We can still, the museum is released, I said. Your planner's operating account is frozen, pending an audit. Your surcharge schemes are recorded. The Berlin consultancy will find an empty stage 2 invoice. The liaison from the street is by the coat check, deciding if he likes your fiancé's brother as posture. We will all, I think, have a quiet, legal night. She blinked. I watched her hands find each other and stay apart, as if they were magnets, misunderstood. You've humiliated me, she said. You invited me to be humiliated, I said. And then you gave me paperwork. The wind made a soft current over the glassware. Tiny sounds like a clock in the distance. The band leader conferred with the planner and then announced a short intermission. A word that always felt like grown-ups, promising children that time can be paused and resumed without consequence. Guests gathered shawls. The moon lifted white and indifferent over the water. The public part of reckoning requires a stage, and here we were on an actual one. I didn't plan to make speeches. I planned to let paper and people meet. Sabine tapped a glass with a spoon, a clear sound that pruned side conversations. Ladies and gentlemen, she said, voice sure. We have a logistical update. Due to a contractual oversight discovered this evening, the museum is released from hosting duties for the dinner segment of this event. The Hotel de Paris is ready to offer hospitality for all guests while the planners resolve administrative questions. Staff will assist you to the shuttles. We appreciate your patience and understanding. A tiny sound from the crowd, like a choir inhaling and failing to sing, moved across the terrace. Etienne's uncle shouted something generous toward Sabine that fell down the steps with a clank. Luc went very still. The planner swallowed and gestured, doing the gold standard of her trade, making a broken thing look like a ribbon. Leela's mother approached, pearls thudding on the invisible scale between style and pressure. Maya, she said with a smile that wanted an audience and a result. Let's not make this about paperwork. We did, I said gently. You did it first. People often expect the disassembly of a lie to be operatic, but it's usually administrative. The bank manager called the planner to confirm the freeze. The planner had to admit that the prepayments were missourced. Compliance escalated. Sabine followed internal rules in a binder that has tabs for everything and a cold water clause for fraud. The liaison from the street took a short walk with Luc and then another with Etienne, tapping his notebook with a pen as if testing its elasticity. I didn't speak into anybody's microphone. I performed the ancient ceremony of watching. Etienne walked over finally, a man whose cufflinks had run out of script. You've made your point, he said, controlled. Be gracious now. Graciousness and liability are not correlatives, I said. You exposed me financially and legally. You rewrote my role without consent. I have no point to make, only a record to keep. He took in a breath at the word record. His family had years of them, most curated, some edited, none audited in the way that makes the room smaller and more honest. This is a wedding, he said. People will talk. They will talk today, I said. They will file tomorrow. A cooler rolled in a small circle near the service area, wheels making a rubber mutter. Someone set down a plate. Porcelain on stone made a clear syllable. The wind brought up the perfume of night-blooming jasmine from the museum's side garden. Sweet and slightly dangerous, like a story you are proud of and ashamed of at the same time. Leela looked like someone reading a script that has mutated. She said too brightly, "We'll fix this." What we'll do first, I said, is stop using my name as a bolt. After that, repair what you will. Her mother's eyes tried to summon the old geometry, where hierarchy solves everything. But money, not respect, had been the variable in their equation. I had changed the variable. It tends to stress the model. The guests began to move, disappointed in the way people are when a specific variety of spectacle is withdrawn. A thin man with a camera slung like a baby goat shot one last frame of the skyline and shut down his flash. The band packed their stands neatly. Disciplined people do not resent order when it interrupts them, only chaos. The liaison from the street stopped with us at the high table and in measured French, asked Leela and Etienne a few establishing questions. Were they aware of any unauthorized signatures? Had they delegated any administrative rights to third parties? Could they account for the Berlin consultancy? Etienne's answers made concentric circles around an absent center. Leela said, "I don't know," in 3 different tones: contrition, deflection, and almost truth. The liaison nodded, noted, and indicated he would follow up in a formal setting. Where words have weight and chairs do not have slipcovers. When he left, Leela exhaled, the spiny exhale of someone who wants mercy without admitting the price. She turned to me and, because we were still ourselves under the jewelry and mistakes, said, "Once, why didn't you tell me you were going to do this?" "I did," I said. "I asked where my place card was." She swallowed a movement like a comma. I lifted the envelope, handed it to Sabine. "For your files," I said. Certified copy of the rescission and the countersigned acceptance. "My counsel's card is inside." "Thank you," Sabine said. "We will record it." The lights reflected on the water below, like someone had drawn a city upside down and then labeled it in pencil. My phone buzzed again, Durand with a short update. "Planner's parent company has acknowledged receipt of your formal complaint. They have indemnified the museum and have agreed to cooperate. The bank auditor will schedule the first review call for Monday at 9:30. The notary has confirmed the original will on record is intact. Your copy was indeed a copy. Good, good, and expected." The sound of order returning quietly, like a coat hung back on its proper peg. I gathered my bag and, because being precise isn't the same as being cruelinged in to Leela. Not to embrace, just to set the tone. "I am going home," I said. "You will be taken care of at the hotel. You will answer questions. You will return any documents you have confused for yours." "You're enjoying this?" she said. Last offense of the ungenerous. "I am not," I said. "I'm relieved." I moved through the terrace toward the stairs that led down to the museum's shell-lit courtyard. A breeze met me at the door with a cool that made me think of kitchens and early mornings and the smell of clean counters. Halfway down, I paused at a window to see the harbor from a different angle. The yachts were patient commas in the sentence of the sea. I could hear a faint echo from the terrace above, voices, the band loading cases, someone laughing twice and then stopping. At the bottom of the stairs, V was waiting, hands in pockets, eyes amused. V is the kind of friend whose introductions come without surnames and whose advice arrives in polite envelopes. "You were very still," V said. "I practiced," I said. "The brother," V said, "is a small man who wants to be a lever. He will break under audit. The fiancée will learn apologies as a language. The mother will update her script. The planner will update her templates. The museum will update its checklists. You will update the locks." "I already have," I said. "I started with the safe." V nodded, approving of practical theology. "There is a shuttle," they said, with a half smile. "Mercedes van." Shade of executive regret. "I'll walk," I said. The night felt like it owed me a street I could cross properly. We stepped down onto Avenue St. Martin, where the stone warms your feet in a way that feels like a promise kept. And the jasmine leaned out over a wall to remind you that even carefully tended places can surprise you with a wild sweetness. At home, the apartment had the kind of quiet that only tells the truth. I set my bag on the console, opened the safe with a code that was mine again, and slid the will's certified copy in beside the original registry certificate Durand had provided, a matryoshka of proof. I sat at the table and wrote a short log entry in my moleskin date. Time, actions, verified, rescinded, countersigned, frozen, escalated, recorded, beautiful verbs that behave. I wrote 2 more names on a next steps list. the Berlin consultancy, and a charity registrar. Who'd appreciate a tidy note about trustees and consent? Before sleep, I texted Luis a thank you and sent Sabine a clean scan of the countersignature. I drafted an email to the planner's compliance officer with a subject line that matched the world. Formal notice of fraudulent authorization venue contract escalation request. I attached the affidavit and the reversal emails, the screenshots of the login pattern, the audio file from the lobby terminal's camera I'd obtained via V, where Lutz's reflection obliged us with a timestamp. Evidence is a generous friend if you treat it like a guest. Morning was a pale wash over the bay, pink and flat at the horizon like a promise that doesn't need to shout. Coffee, hot and precise. The smell of toast. I opened the windows. The air moved through the room like a patient story. The phone hummed with the day's first honest work, and I began to answer it. The ripples arrived on schedule. The planner's parent company issued a quiet statement to their vendors. A review. A pause on discretionary advances. A reminder that templates are not mines. The museum updated its manual to require dual-factor authentication on all contract riders, witnessed and recorded. The bank scheduled a 3-step audit, preliminary review, focused inquiry, final certification. Luke found himself explaining his midnight hobbies to a room where wooden chairs scraped the floor with civic dignity. Etienne learned the art of calling people back. Leela returned my mother's jewelry that she'd borrowed for a fitting 2 pieces I hadn't even realized were missing. Wrapped in tissue, her apology as careful and unadorned as a signed receipt. Our family group chat, that permanent misalignment of tone and intent, turned into a ledger of short notes. My uncle wrote, "Let's all breathe." My aunt wrote, "In difficult times, we must stick together." And then separately, "You could have told us sooner." I replied with a photograph of the writer with my falsified signature and the magnified K, and wrote, "I told you exactly when I should." My cousin Adela wrote privately to say I had taught her something and that she had changed the password on her own shared planning portal for her baby's crochet. Sometimes justice looks like a new password. Sometimes it looks like a countersignature. It doesn't often look like a dessert cart. Days went on. The summer held its breath for another week and then exhaled into September. Sabine emailed to say that the museum had updated the public calendar to reflect a private closure that night. She thanked me for my professionalism, a word that in this context meant telling the truth without making the room sticky. Duran filed the last 2 affidavits and then took me for a small celebratory lunch on a shaded street. Where the napkins are heavy enough to suggest intention, we spoke of books and people and the way certain verbs do the work of wrists. Leela asked to meet. I chose a place that has no velvet and where the waiter doesn't interrupt unless a glass is empty. Café de la Marie, quiet corner table. She arrived wearing less. Fewer rings, fewer gestures. We ordered water and a bowl of olives that glistened like the idea of treasure. You can eat one by one until it disappears without consequence. She said, "I am angry." And I said, "I know." And we agreed quietly that anger is not a strategy. She looked at her hands, something she used to do when we were children, and she had been caught in an untruth that wanted promotion. I thought, she said that being important meant someone else would handle the stability part. Importance without stability is performance, I said. It looks good until the wind checks the joints. And you didn't come to the wedding, she said. A note of loss that didn't beg. I did, I said. I came to the part where it mattered. We ate olives. The air moved through the cafe like a hand smoothing paper. A scooter went past and left a smell of heat and metal, a little harsh but honest. She told me about the foundation and how sincerely she wanted it to do something other than feed her friends' resumes. I told her that sincerity is a fine raw material and that compliance shapes it into something that won't collapse. I offered to introduce her to a bank manager who can explain fiduciary duty without making bonds. You feel like you've been assigned to detention. She nodded. The learning had pried her pride open, and inside, despite everything, she wanted to be decent. I found the original of the Wills copy, she said, and placed an envelope on the table like a truce. It was in a folder in the credenza. I think Etienne put it there while we were planning. He thought it was safer. It wasn't. I didn't ask whether she wanted forgiveness. I signed a small receipt in my head. Item returned, lesson acknowledged, relationship adjusted. That night, the bank's preliminary audit report arrived, clear on my part. Gray fog on the planner's side, an elegant censure dressed as a recommendation. The Berlin consultancy was a cousin of a cousin's friend. Their invoices will go unpaid. Luke had already updated his social media with something about taking a break to pursue creative projects, which is what people write when they have lost the privilege of logical outcomes. The planner sent me a thank you for my professional feedback, which is what people write when they have been shown a mirror and have not screamed. I accepted the thanks and closed the thread. There are people who think justice is an explosion, and there are people who know it's an account reconciled. A week after the museum night, I stood at my window with a cup of tea, watched the lights slide over slate rooftops, and thought of the verbs I liked best: filed, served, notarized, recorded, reversed, frozen, audited, certified, witnessed, countersigned, escalated, cited, complied, enjoined, indemnified. The air smelled of salt and morning, and my living room was the color of new patience. In the distance, a bell tried out 3 tones, decided on 2. My phone pinged with a message from Sabine, a photo of a small plaque at the museum's staff entrance. It read, "Respects the paperwork, it respects you back." She added, internal joke, "I hope you don't mind." I smiled and wrote, "It's not a joke if it works." In another text, Adela sent a picture of her front door with a new lock. "Upgraded," she wrote, and it might have been nothing, but it was something. A month later, one more ripple arrived in the mail, a small card with thick edges. It was from Leela, a note printed in modest type. We were legally married at the civil office with 2 witnesses and the breeze. We are starting the foundation with an interim trustee me until we learn. Would you consider advising us for a fee? There was a footnote. P.S. The place card company found your card. It was misplaced in a pile. Seems too neat to be true, but sometimes things are plainly dumb. I laughed softly, and then I did not. I wrote back with a fee structure that respected my time. I offered a list of requirements, bank logs reviewed quarterly, all transfers recorded, all wire confirmations archived, all signatures witnessed and countersigned. Every clause understood before initials met the margin. I offered the name of the bank manager, Rashed, and the number for the compliance officer who now had the leverage he needed to rewrite templates and retrain ambition. I didn't offer absolution. I offered orientation. The last time I saw Luke was by accident. In the lobby of a building where the mailboxes have brass nameplates and history pretends to be polite. He was thinner in the way stress writes itself before courage can. He nodded once and said nothing. I nodded back. There's nothing left to take when a procedure takes what you borrowed. As for me, I added a new ritual on the first Monday of each month. I sit with a stack of documents and a pot of tea and put my life in order in ink. It takes an hour and buys me a season. I've learned that dignity isn't a tone. It is a set of actions done before the crisis arrives and again while it knocks. Sometimes, in a quiet moment, the phrase returns like the tide returning to a precise stone. Seems I'm not family. It lands differently now, less like a verdict and more like a measurement. You can choose where to place yourself in the structure that either holds you or holds you down. Months turned into a new normal. The foundation launched with a clean charter, smaller than its original dreams, more likely to keep promises. The planner took a sabbatical and came back with a sworn love for checklists. The museum staff told the story of the night. The paperwork saved them from a more complicated story. The bank adjusted its training to include a case study named Anonymous, Careful, and Useful. I walked the harbor on a cool evening, the light like brushed steel, the smell of caramel from a kiosk selling almonds, the sound of a boat rope thrum against a cleat like a bass line in a song that never hurries. Justice had not exploded. It had set a table and invited schedules, witnesses, and receipts. It had eaten slowly and paid the bill. At dinner with friends, someone asked if I regretted it. And I answered honestly, I regret the part where love and paper sit on opposite ends of the bench. I do not regret the signatures that found their proper hands. I don't think regret is a useful noun in this context. I prefer words that earn their keep: remedy, record, repair. I received an invitation, eventually, to a small family gathering where no one expected anyone else to be anyone else's parachute. I went, stayed an hour, and left with my coat smelling faintly of smoke and rosemary and the kind of laughter that doesn't require an audience. Outside, the night air met my lungs like something notarized, real, witnessed, certified by the season. I did not set out to punish anyone. I set out to remove my name from a load-bearing place where it had been wedged without consent. The consequences were shaped by that removal, not by my appetite for theater. At the museum, on the rooftop, with the sea black and honest and the lights making a poem on the water that did not need adjectives, I kept my promise to myself: no shouting. Process and receipts. A quiet verb that carries weight. My aunt sent a message a while later, simple and clean: I understand. She never elaborated. This is what passes for victory in certain families. I took it and put it where I keep the good forks. On a dull morning, the planner forwarded an email thread that documented updated safeguards dual approvals, regular reconciliations, template audits. I read it with the satisfaction one feels when a door you've fixed continues to close without complaint. Sabine sent a picture of the terrace with a caption: clear skies, honest paperwork. I keep the rescission letter, the countersigned acceptance, the bank's audit report, and the notary certification in a folder labeled with the dullest possible word: resolved. It pleases me to see it on the shelf next to joy and taxes. Order like that is a soft room you can always enter. And there are moments small, unsung, when the world tips its hat to diligence. A clerk at the registrar smiled when I passed a clean form across the counter. Merci de la faire correctement. Thank you for doing it correctly. It felt like a compliment one could put in a frame. I don't mind that the rooftop was dramatic. It was a drama staged by the laws of cause and effect. The band, the lights, the jasmine, the taste of rosemary and salt. The cool stone under thin solace, those were the set dressing. The story was written in the firm script of recorded, reversed, certified, redacted, witnessed. I won't pretend it didn't bruise anyone. But bruises teach the body where it ends and begins. A year later, Leela sent a short video of a scholarship recipient reading a thank you in a small classroom where the windows were open to a day that looked like an argument with delight. The caption read, "We used the checklist." I watched it twice. Then I made eggs and washed the pan immediately, because unfinished dishes are the enemy of clear mornings. When strangers ask what I do, I say, I read what people skip, and they laugh until they realize they need a person like that. Then they ask for my rate. I tell them. They pay or they don't. Either way, the forms are neat. On the anniversary of the rescission, I stood again on the museum's public terrace in daylight, a tourist among tourists. The stone was warm, and the sea, which never lies because it has no reason to, made its evidence sound. I leaned on the same railing and watched the same harbor. The city was itself. I breathed, and memory felt like a completed file. Not heavy, not light, but organized. A child ran past, chasing a bubble that thought it was a planet. Someone's cologne tried too hard to be cedar and landed somewhere near polite soap. Sometimes, even now, the old sentence looks in through the window. Polite as a neighbor, seems I'm not family. I smile at it because it is both true and wrong. Family is not a lever you insert into someone else's life. It is a place you stand that does not narrate your consent for you. I prefer the other family I have. The one made of colleagues who bring you copies and friends who text you evidence and neighbors who love a good audit. If you have read this far, you likely carry a folder of your own. Open it, label it. Fill it with the tidy miracles of reversed, rescinded, recorded, certified, witnessed. If you're ready, I can map your own dignified justice playbook. Tell me your setting, roles, and leverage, and I'll help you structure it. And if you want this as a tailored, extended case file narrative, give me your inputs now and say, compose my 2 OK.